The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most well-known places in the entire world, simply because of all of the strange and unusual disappearances that have occurred within its abstract borders. Also known by some as the Devil's Triangle, it is a region loosely described as the triangle connecting the southernmost tip of Florida, the islands of Puerto Rico, and the island of Bermuda. Plenty of mysteries have started their life within this relatively small portion of the ocean. One example is the Mary Celeste, an alcohol transport ship which was found floating with all of its goods intact, but every member of the crew was mysteriously missing. Another would be the well-known case of Amelia Earhart, who famously vanished in the region during an attempted flight around the globe. Suffice to say, the Bermuda Triangle has seen its fair share of mysteries. Although there have been plenty of odd happenings within this region of ocean, none are as strange as the disappearance of Flight 19. 5 entire planes were lost to the ocean on that fateful day, as well as another craft which we'll discuss later. Despite a lengthy search, very little has actually been found regarding these downed planes, and the mysterious aspects and even corruption in the search have led to massive speculation from both private sectors and the public. Flight 19 was the name given to a group of 5 planes that all disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle on December 5, 1945. There were 14 airmen flying these planes, and all of them were supposedly lost to the waves on that fateful day. All 5 of them suddenly lost contact with their air traffic controllers while flying through the region.
Damn, if we just fly west, you would get home. Hold it. Head west. Damn it.
Which was the last time any of these planes were heard from. All 5 aircraft operating that day were TBM-type aircraft, which were torpedo bombers designed to attack ships with aerial torpedoes. The flight leader was Navy Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, who specialized in this very type of aircraft. He had over 2,500 flight hours, with most of them being in TBMs. The trainee pilots, who were operating the remaining planes behind his own, each had at least 300 hours in the cockpit. Most of the students had been in this general area, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for quite some time. Taylor, however, had only just arrived from Miami on the day of the incident. Many speculate that this plays a role in the disappearance of the planes. The flight exercise being practiced that day involved 4 legs of flight, as well as a practice bombing that would be carried out at Hen and Chicken Shoals. The planes were known to reach at least this point, because there are records of a pilot requesting permission to drop his last torpedo. This was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It would be one of the last routine pieces of communication before things began to get strange.
Powers. What is your compass reading, Powers? I don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost after that last turn.
Radio transmissions would be overheard both by air traffic control as well as by other aircraft in close vicinity. Another pilot by the name of Robert F. Cox heard one of the students receive a transmission asking for his compass readings. He replied, quote, "I don't know exactly where we are. We must have gotten lost after that last turn."
MT-28, this is FT-74. What is your trouble? Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Cox then radioed in asking for the student, named Powers, to identify themselves and their situation so that they could receive help. Powers didn't respond. Instead, flight leader Taylor called in and explained that both of his compasses were out and that he was trying to find his way back to shore. He said, quote, "I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." This may have been his gravest mistake. Knowing this information, Cox informed Taylor that to get from the Keys to Fort Lauderdale, he needed to put the sun on his power wing and fly north up the coast until arriving in the city. This is where communication between Taylor and air traffic control began to be a bit spotty. They asked several questions, including whether or not he had standard YG, a sort of transmitter allowing plane triangulation, but he did not reply. He did radio in a little while later, however, and said the following, quote, "We are heading 030 degrees for 45 minutes, then we will fly north to make sure we are not over the Gulf of Mexico." During this time, air traffic control was having no luck finding any bearings on the planes via radar or other available means of triangulation. Taylor was told to switch his broadcast frequency in order for his communications to be more easily picked up, but after several moments, he said something quite cryptic that still baffles many experts on the subject today. He said, quote, "I cannot switch frequencies. I must keep my planes intact." After that, the weather began to worsen, and very few transmissions were heard.
Get home. Hold it. Head west. Damn it.
There were a few flight course changes, as well as some students saying that they just needed to head west in order to find their way home. It is expected that they did not do this due to military discipline and obedience to the flight leader. If they had turned, however, they might have been able to save their lives. The last thing that flight leader Taylor was heard saying still sends chills up many people's spines. He said, quote, "All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." He was informing his men on how to die together. There were no further transmissions heard after this one, and all 5 planes grouped under the name of Flight 19 were officially declared missing soon afterward. The search started fairly quickly. The sooner a search begins, the higher the chance of actually finding a crashed plane. A separate leader later spoke to seeing flames from an apparent explosion leaping to over 100 feet high, and many believe that this was the remainder of the PBM-5 that sought nothing but to rescue the downed airmen. Unlike the planes, the cause for this ship's explosion is somewhat well accepted. Another plane that had been flying through the airspace was reported to lose contact just above that location, and many suspect that it fell through the air and crashed down onto the Marine aircraft. But what are the odds of another plane malfunctioning in this area after 5 went missing? And what are the chances that it malfunctioned right above the rescue ship, before crashing into it and causing it to explode? Furthermore, how did it explode in exactly the right way so that the crew and most of the ship would never be seen again? It's all very mysterious. A few months after the incident, the U.S. Navy Board of Investigation released a report that made several observations. Their first was that they believed Taylor's assessment of being over the Keys to be incorrect. He was used to flying in Miami, where he would regularly fly over the Keys during his training. But being in Fort Lauderdale, it's very unlikely that they would be flying over the Bahamas. This means that when they turned in order to head back to the coast, they were actually flying directly towards the Atlantic Ocean with no land in sight. Taylor, however, was not at fault. If his compasses were working as expected, he would not have been forced to make a guess as to where they were, and instead would have known his coordinates and where exactly to fly in order to get home. It is incredibly strange that all of the compasses in every aircraft that was a part of Flight 19 malfunctioned practically in sync. It leads one to wonder what kind of interference must be coming from the Bermuda Triangle. The official report on this incident lists the direct cause of the disappearance as cause unknown. This was not the case at first, but Taylor's mother contended that the Navy was blaming her son for the accident when they didn't have the planes or the bodies to make an argument on. The only people who knew exactly what happened had died aboard those planes, so it was unfair to blame the flight leader without knowing the express cause. There were plenty of searches over the years for the missing planes, but very little substantial evidence has actually been found. The wreckage of 5 Avenger planes was found in an area that could have been a possible deposit zone for Flight 19, but it was later discovered to be a flight lost at sea on October 9th, 1943, over 2 years before Flight 19 would take off from Fort Lauderdale. While there are many hypotheses regarding what happened to Flight 19 on that fateful day, nobody knows for sure what caused the 5 planes to vanish into thin air. No wreckage has been found, no bodies have been found, and everyone looking into the disappearance is left with more questions than answers. It is just another strange and fantastical event to happen within the borders of the ever-elusive Bermuda Triangle.